As the spirits align here during the season of thanks, got a chance today to speak to somebody who literally came out of left field yesterday, dropped me an email about a dear friend of his that he had collaborated with back in the day. And I just started to do a little bit of background on my guest and am absolutely floored by the timing of his life and also the creative genius that he brought to the bandstand and to pen to paper. And it allowed him to cross paths with many transcendent musical figures, and also create a legacy for himself that will live on long after he's left this planet. Stephen Fiske, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, thank you, Jake. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's an honor to have you, man. I just kind of wanted you to talk about that the music, the reason that I was born in 1978. So, I mean, I was in an analog world for 20 some years, but I missed the period of music that I am very fond of, which is essentially the late 60s and early 70s. But what I wanted you to talk about was the aesthetic of the folk musician, the idea of being a skiffle player, not somebody who was just thrashing around on the instrument, but ultimately picking up an instrument, creating your own tuning, developing your own original sound, and putting a band together. You can take that anywhere you want.
Yeah, well, I started, uh, can you hear me?
You sound great.
Okay, good. I started born into a musical family. My mother was an opera singer in New York City, and she played piano and had an accompanist who came and they rehearsed her repertoire. And she had students who came in and out of the house every day for piano and voice lessons. So I grew up in a home where the soundtrack was my mother's singing, vocalizing. I mean, she went up and down the scales every day in our house. So, so music was just, it was there every day. And I was encouraged by my parents. My father was also a writer and an editor. And they encouraged me in the arts. And I was always singing and writing poetry and drawing pictures, and very creative kid, and took part in school plays and had, leading roles, and was very active in all of that. And then I went to the High School of Music and Art in New York City, which was a school, a very progressive school. And the folk music of the 1960s was the sounds that were reverberating through the halls of the school. And I learned to play folk guitar and pick up the songs of the times, the songs of freedom, the songs of social justice and folk music era, and just became a self-taught guitarist and was writing songs. But I never thought of it as a professional direction for myself.
Oh, interesting. This is so. First of all, I mean, it's just so tripped out because I just connected with a drummer down here in Tucson where I live, and he went to Music and Art High. I mean, he's much younger than us, but that place still, I mean, the amount of cats that went to that school were, I mean, were you hip to the jazz scene that was going on at that time?
Well, when I came to the school, there was this slogan that was going around: "Bird lives." You know, it was
This is making my wait. He'd already passed at that point, too,
right,
right?
right.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Bird lives. I mean, what? So you didn't really know what that meant. Did you know who Charlie Parker was at that time?
And I did not.
Yeah.
I got educated because of that, because it was written on the walls, and everyone was saying that, and so it was part of my education, part of my musical enlightenment.
All right. Well, I'm going to read you this quote. This is a guy you actually, knowing how cosmic this whole connection is, you might even have. This guy just passed away. An incredible multi-string player, guy named Maine Smith. Does that name ring a bell at all?
No.
So Maine was anyway. I'm going to read you this quote from him because this relates to the folk aesthetic of that time. He said, "My father's name was Henry Nash Smith. His PhD thesis turned into a book that was widely read entitled Virgin Land, the American West as Symbol and Myth. In essence, he was the founder of the field of academic pursuit that came to be called American Studies. He was the acknowledged generator of a field of study which involved history, sociology, and literature. There was very little technical knowledge of music or sight reading of music involved in any of that. The materials that he used to provide source information were defined as the part of America that was not populated by farmers, the people who were making the initial cultural contact with the Indians." Now, what I'm trying to get at is, you said you learned folk guitar, but there was no codified way to learn an instrument, and so much of the folk aesthetic came from the stories from different regional parts of the country. So it wasn't like today's academy where you're getting this assembly line of musicians coming out sounding very much the same for a variety of reasons, but it was not an intellectual exercise, I don't think. And I would love you to just talk about the experiential learning you had in order to, no one's going to compare you to John McLaughlin, but how you got yourself together in an organic and sort of street scholar sense.
Well, there was a guitar lying around my family apartment, and it was a nylon string, classical type guitar, cheap. And I just began picking it up and putting my fingers in the frets, and pretty much I got a book that showed you how, little charts, finger charts,
Sure.
recordings, and I just taught myself. But mostly I watched other guitarists sing and play and just emulated what they were doing and asked for a few pointers. But basically, I was just self-taught, and I was somehow committed to doing that. I loved the idea of playing an instrument and singing to the chordings. It just made sense to me that that was something that I loved to do and wanted to continue doing. And I started writing songs right away. When I learned a D chord, the first chord I learned, I began, D, A7, G. I began to, sing along with what I was playing, even though my fingers weren't, uh, able to hold the chords yet. My fingers were not I didn't have the muscle memory yet. I was developing that. So that was the very beginning, but I was surrounded by classical music at home. And then at school, everyone was playing the folk music of the times. And
now I want to be clear though, because it's just so funny you bring this up because I mean, there's something to be said for, I mean, clear. I interviewed Peter Yarrow, rest in peace, and
yeah,
obviously they were a harbinger of the day, and you had the Kingston Trio. That was all very easily digestible. But like I wanted to ask you about one cat in particular. It was a guy named Tom Rush. Did you get off on that cat?
I knew of him. I didn't know him.
So I'm just saying, when you talk about getting pointers from students, obviously, uh, there were plenty of cats that were folk, uh, burgeoning folk musicians. But um, did you go? Were you able to go to Gertie's Folk City, or were you able
Yeah,
to?
I went when I got some confidence in what I was doing.
Right.
I did go to the Hootenannies at Gertie's Folk City, the bitter end.
Oh, please break this down. This is magical stuff.
And at Gertie's Folk City, it was hosted by Jose Feliciano.
Oh my
He
God.
was the Hootenanny host
He was hosting Hootenannies.
at
That
Gertie's
is
Folk City.
so insane.
And he was fantastic. There was a lineup of like 25 or 30 people who signed up to play, and everybody got a chance to play a couple of songs. And then Jose Feliciano would, midway, he would perform, and he was absolutely magical and fantastic.
At that time, he was singing. I mean, it was more like Brazilian folk, right? I mean, he wasn't. Was there a trap? Was there a drummer involved, or was it just
No, no, no. He was just playing acoustic guitar, flamenco.
flamenco guitar? Yeah, flamenco.
He
That's
was
right.
great at flamenco, and he was born in Puerto Rico, but
That's right.
he spoke English well. Of course, he was blind, and his playing was immaculate. He was an excellent guitarist and a fabulous singer, and I was just mesmerized by his presence there at Gertie's, and to my surprise, I performed at the Hoot. I was the last one. The place had emptied out, and I got up and played a little bit. And Jose was very gracious, and the owner of the place invited me to come back and have a night. So
Oh,
I
you have like to be to have like a lead gig there.
right
Wow.
to play a set, and that gave me the confidence to think, well, maybe there's something to this music thing that I might pursue a career in music. It was one of the first things that was encouraging to me, and Jose was encouraging to me.
What specifically? What I'm curious about was it? I don't know. So much of the jazz aesthetic that I've covered, has to do with nonverbal communication on the bandstand. I mean, he was supportive of what that gave you the
Well, he
thought.
was appreciative of my playing and singing, and he just said, good job or something like that. He just was encouraging, and that was like a big boost to my confidence at the time, because I just felt like a a nuanced, non non accomplished beginner, and he he gave me that encouragement, and then I got a gig.
So
So
what did that gig look like? I mean, was it just solo Fisk up there?
yeah, at first,
Okay,
I would
yeah,
they would have nights where you would have like half a dozen or more guys or people who had made the hootenanny, been at the hootenanny, and then they would have a night. And so at that time, there was a guy around named Elmer Gordon, who was a managerial type of person involved in the folk music scene. He had worked with Dave Van Ronk, and he
sure.
kind of took an interest in me and encouraged me, and he booked me to open a concert for Buffy Sainte-Marie,
Oh, wow.
which I did, and then he helped me audition for a band that was popular at the time. I mean, we're talking about the 1960s.
Oh, you no, this is my wheelhouse. Wait, you're talking about you're thinking you built up a little bit of confidence, like was this did you hit the bandstand before Dylan put the drum set on at Newport Folk, or was this more like later?
Yeah, yeah, this was before. As a matter of fact,
Yeah,
at one of the times at Gertie's Folk City, Dylan came in
I believe. Yeah.
and played a few songs.
Oh my
And
God, this is legendary, dude.
it was
You're talking 63-ish kind of range, maybe 64.
right. I
Yeah.
graduated high school at Music and Art in 63, and was at first I went to City College of New York. That's where I met my girlfriend, who became my wife.
Yes.
We're still married all these years later.
Unbelievable. God bless.
Right.
Wait, so okay, so I want to be clear. So this was like, I mean, we're talking about,
64, 65,
I
somewhere
mean,
in.
Dylan had not brought the trap set on stage. Him and Grossman hadn't come to blows yet. So this was,
He hadn't gone electric.
he hadn't gone, and so the Beatles were known at that time, though. I mean, they were on Ed Sullivan in 62, right? I think this is like
Right,
that. Yeah.
right.
But you were more, looking back on it, can you talk about the hindsight's always refreshing, but and putting you can get in your own way here, but can you talk about what you was it a finger picking style that was unique? Was it your voice? Was it your lyrics? I mean, can you talk about what allowed you to be singular amidst this bastion of pretty heavy folk musicians, enough to get noticed, put on bills, audition for bands, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, I was a combination. I learned a finger picking style, but it was my own kind of I just developed my own way of doing it.
Sure.
It was unique. It wasn't I didn't have any teacher. I didn't have any music teacher. I just, I strummed and I finger picked and I wrote songs, and that's what I did. I didn't really, was not a music student. At high school in music and art, I was an art student. And I loved sports. I was a sports nut.
Right, I know, dude. You were following in the footsteps of Willis Reed and Clyde Frazier,
Well,
dude. Clyde Frazier.
not quite,
No, but
although
I mean, the injury curtailed your. But were you like a point where were you front line or backcourt?
I was a shooting guard at NYU. I played at City College at first, and then got offers from different schools,
Wow.
and decided to stay in New York City because music and art. I was an art student in music and art, and I was continuing as an art major. And NYU had a great art department. Besides which, my father had died when I was 15, and my mom was, I just felt like I wanted to stay with my mom.
I dig. You feel like maybe your ears were even bigger than most because of the relentless harmonies that your mom, the octaves and the scales that she was singing every day. I mean, you just sort of it opened you sonically more than most people.
I would assume so. I mean, I just grew up with it. It was reverberating through the apartment. As a matter of fact, my mom was a big soprano. She had a big soprano voice,
Right.
and she was with several different opera companies and did a lot of solo work at churches with choirs. She was the guest soloist at a church with a choir. And so I would come down the street of my neighborhood, and I could hear my mom vocalizing through the alleyways. She had a big voice,
Oh
and
my, it was
everybody.
reverberating through the. This is so beautiful because even at that time, I mean, there was such little. I mean, I know you could drive from the five spot or the half node uptown in 10 minutes. I mean, there was very minimal traffic. It was just such a the volume of New York City at that time was magical, man. And you could
It
hear.
was. It was a beautiful place. I loved growing up there, and I lived in the Washington Heights neighborhood of uptown Manhattan, and it was a magical place for me. I loved it. I
It was
loved where I.
it was magical at that time because there was a lot of commercial stores at the bottom, and then you'd have residential at the apartments above it. It was a very much a hybrid kind of thing, as opposed to the McDonaldized version of it today with, you
Yeah,
know,
this was pre McDonald. This
no,
this
so I have to ask Fisk. I mean, this is really important because it's where the rubber meets the road for Jake Feinberg. I mean, so you get a little bit of traction. Can you talk about your the first time that you decided to work with? Did you ever have opportunities to work with a wash tub bass like Fritz Richmond? Those cats.
Not really.
Yeah,
Uh,
but I mean the jug band scene was that's really what Dylan coming in and singing tunes pre Newport, going him and Grossman going to blows. I mean, jug bands, I mean, across the country were happening. So, but I mean, I know you were more folk, but I mean,
yeah, I was
you
not
must have.
really into the
Yeah.
jug band thing, but what happened was uh, I was called to an audition for a band that was popular at the time, the New Christy Minstrels.
Wow.
And I went to the audition in this little folk type cafe, and there must have been 100 uh, guitarists, all most of them were wearing harmonicas around their neck, you know.
Sure.
Uh, and I remember the audition. Randy Sparks, the leader of the New Christian Minstrels, was sitting there, and a guy would get up and sing a few bars, and he'd say, "Next, next." So I thought it was so cruel, and I thought, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to go up there, and he's going to go next to me, and I'm going to be,
Right.
shot
You
down."
be, yeah, right. Downtrodden. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
but I think that my buddy, this guy Elmer Gordon, had contacted Randy Sparks about me, but because he let me play a couple of songs, and then he called me back and said, "Come back to the next edition." Then I went back, and then there were like only a dozen uh, people, and then we all played a little bit, and then he called me back the next day and said, "We'd like you to join the New Christy Minstrels." And I thought, oh my goodness, let me think about that, because I had just received a basketball scholarship to New York University. And if I joined the New Christian Minstrels, I would be eligible for the draft. And the Vietnam War was raging. I was vehemently opposed to the war, and I
Sure.
certainly didn't want to be drafted. And I was really key on the fact that I had a full scholarship through basketball at New York University, and I was in the art department there. So,
And obviously, it would have kept you out of the draft.
right. So I didn't want to, I turned him down.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it does at that time. I mean, the war was only getting, the darkness was just getting darker there. I actually think it was really in the end, it worked out, but I just think it was the right decision overall.
Right. And so but it also gave me another boost towards thinking that music could be a professional direction for me. So then I went to NYU, and I was playing basketball at Madison Square Garden, Division One big time basketball. But then I got injured, and the injury, just was shattering because I had basketball dreams. And that's when I really turned to music. Uh,
You did you how many years in did you get injured?
well, it was my senior year, and I
Okay,
was
so I mean, you had exhausted the scholarship, but I mean, there was a chance for you to.
well, I'd been to City College for 2 years and then
Right,
transferred.
right,
In those days, when you transferred, you had to sit out. You had to redshirt. You had to be redshirted.
right.
So this was my chance now to, be a starter on the team. And I started, and I was playing well, but then I got injured. And then I had the doctor told me the words I never wanted to hear, which were, "You have to stop playing." And I said, "No, no, no." Uh, I had a hernia condition, so the it I couldn't play. So uh,
I mean, clearly you could have just. I mean, okay, so that's traumatic. Clearly, brother Fiske is still with us today. So you pulled yourself up, you dusted yourself off, and you walked out into the West Village. What did that, I mean, what was percolating? Because now we're talking more like 67 ish, right?
it was 60. Actually, I was out of school at 68. I graduated high school in 63, and I was out of school at NYU in 68.
Okay,
But
so I mean, the film, I
but
mean, I mean, you go ahead, go ahead.
but before that, in the summer of 67,
Yeah.
I traveled to California, where my sister was a graduate student. My sister and brother-in-law were graduate students at UC Berkeley.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
I was out in the Bay Area, and I went to Speedway Meadow when the Grateful Dead and the Jefferson Airplane and the Sons of Champlin and Quicksilver Messenger Service were all performing, and it was like a sunny, magical day, and I was blown away by the
Dude,
experience.
this is the most happy Thanksgiving, man. This is for a 47-year-old ambassador for the music and journalist, this is making my year because I don't care. those guys at that time, it was about as raw could get. But you mentioned the Sons of Champlin. By far, by far the best musician. I mean, a lot of those other bands, I mean, and I love the Dead and the Jefferson Airplane, all those, Cipollina, but man, the Sons of Champlin, they were the baddest cats. Those
They
cats
were
could.
a really good band.
Oh my! So I mean, did you drop some acid that day as well, or was it just a natural high?
No, it was, I was definitely,
You were high.
I was high and I was psychedelic.
It was
And
psychedelicized. Yeah.
I was psychedelicized,
That's
absolutely.
so Ken Babs and Ken Kesey. I'm surprised you didn't run into them at that show, dude.
Well, I was just a kid in the crowd,
Right, right, right. So
dancing
I mean, you wait. Wait. Speedway Meadows. Where was that exactly?
in
Is that
Golden
in?
Gate Park, in the
Wow.
middle of Golden Gate Park,
Okay,
towards,
so at this point, the bands are still just basically taking the bull by the horns and setting up concerts in the park.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, I didn't know any of them, and I didn't know Dan Healy yet, but he was
No.
in the middle of it, uh, running sound and everything. And I just thought that was the greatest thing I'd ever been a part of, and it was
It
very,
was. It definitely was, man.
it was,
Yeah.
especially during the summer of love. And I came home thinking, man, I think I want to go back
Right.
and find a band, because the folk music era was at that point was kind of diminishing, and it had kind of passed me by. But I was basically a folk singing guitar songwriter. But I came to California with my girlfriend in the summer of '68, thinking, all right, we're out here on a wild adventure and we're heading to San Francisco. And I'm thinking of finding musicians and maybe starting a band.
This is absolutely brilliant. I just want to be clear, even before you left New York, were you able to go, not that you were like a fanatic, but did you get to see uh Coltrane before he passed, or Dolphy or Mingus? Did the jazz
Not
thing?
really. I
Yeah.
wasn't a jazz aficionado as much as I was a Pete Seeger,
No, well,
Judy
I mean, there's
Collins.
nothing. I mean, Seeger was singing about out a garbage can with having a fire out of it. He was singing labor tunes. I mean, he was
Yeah,
unbelievable. That guy. That guy was a shot. He was a jazzer through and through as well. But I know what you're saying, and I just wonder if I would have been hip enough or have big enough years to even have been on the scene. Because you talk to. I mean, David Grisman's a dear friend, and he was the kind of guy who was going to the Village Gate to see Dolphy play, but not everybody was a jazz head.
right. I was not a jazz head, although I had worked as a singing waiter at the Red Garter, which was a banjo bar in the village, and on Sunday nights they had jazz sessions,
Oh
and
my God.
I really enjoyed
Oh
the,
my
the
God. Brother Fisk. All right, so Brother Fisk goes out there with your girlfriend, soon to be wife. Um, and
and
did you
I arrive in San Francisco broke, but because I had because I had worked at the Red Garter in New York City, the owner of the Red Garter had a franchise in San Francisco, and he said, "You got a job. The day you arrive, you got a job at the Red Garter in San Francisco." So I started working there as a singing waiter.
where was that, in North Beach? Where was that
Yes,
located?
it was in North
Got
Beach.
it. Yep.
And my sister and brother-in-law had an apartment on Montgomery Street in North Beach.
Oh my God.
And so we stayed there, and both of us got jobs. I got job as a waiter at the Red Garter, and Nikki, my wife, my girlfriend then, was working as a waitress. And so every night we'd meet at like 2 o'clock in the morning with our pockets full of tips,
Of course.
and then we subletted an apartment in Berkeley and would go there and spill our pockets out on the kitchen table and count the money. It was so much fun.
God, that is so beautiful. You
And
know who still lives, and knock on wood, him and his wife just had their 60th wedding anniversary, and he still lives on Henry Street, and you guys might have been passing in the night back in '65 because he went by a different name. But who still lives out in Berkeley is Wavy Gravy.
Oh yes, I knew Wavy Gravy. I
Did you
met
know
him.
him when he was Hugh Romney?
I don't remember ever
Because
knowing
he
him
was
by
Hugh
any
Rom.
other
He in
name.
'65 he was doing beat. He was doing. He was one of the first cats to be doing beat poetry with a jazz backing group. You know, he'd hire those cats, and but he wasn't Wavy Gravy then. But he's still. I mean, he's still on Henry Street. So you guys are throwing the
Well, he
money
was
at.
on stage at the Summer of Love in Speedway Meadow. He was always around. So
So I want
I
to be
didn't
clear though.
know
You know,
him.
this is really important though. So like, I mean, you went out in the summer of 60, 68, 67.
67.
So that,
And
I
then I
mean, that is, yeah,
returned.
yeah,
I came back to San Francisco in 68. And we
got,
wound up staying.
I got it. So you pour the change out in on the table, and then it
Right.
may have been too, I mean, can you talk about some of the early, I'm assuming you went to Berkeley Community Theater. Like, can you talk about some of the early venues that you were checking out, at least to maybe meet some cats? I break that whole thing down.
Well, I went around to music stores to just try and find postings of musicians. And there was a music store in North Beach. I forget which one it was, but there was a a postcard size, like an index card. The guy said, "I'm an organist and I'm looking for a band." So I called him up, and he invited me over, and I went over to his house. He lived up Clayton Street, up the hill from Haight, uh, in like a walk up Victorian style house,
Sure.
and his apartment was the door was open. I walked up the stairs. I remember walking up the stairs and this guy coming down the creaky wooden stairs, and he had a satchel, and he was carrying a satchel which reeked of marijuana, fresh marijuana.
Of course, sounds great. Yeah.
And so then I walked up and the door was open to Al's apartment. And he said, "Come on in." And I walked in, and there he was in bed in his bedroom with a beautiful girl. And they were smoking a big cigar size doobie. And, he said, "Here." He handed me to take a toke, and we started talking. And
Was this like in the morning? And this is so
uh,
great, man. Yeah, I
uh,
love it.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was kind of early day, early part of the day.
He was smoking a big Bob Marley joint, and then you guys were
Yeah,
roasting away. Yeah.
right. And
So
then
who was this cat? Who did
his
he turn
name
out
was
to be?
Al Rose. Al Rose.
Al Rose.
And Al Rose was an organist who had been playing in bands for years in Las Vegas and all kinds of places. He was
Wow.
older than I. I was just like 22 years old, and he was like, almost. I think he was in his 30s, and he was, his face was heavily lined, and it looked to me like he'd been playing and smoking and drinking and doing drugs in clubs for years. So we went to he had his organ in a shop out on Clement Street where he was souping up his big B3. He played a Hammond B3, which was a huge wooden instrument, very popular in
Oh
the
my God. I mean, at that time it was all the rage. And at that time, Jimmy Smith and Les McCann and Groove Holmes, they were taking the B3 out of the church into the nightclubs. That was right when it was happening.
right. And Lee Michaels was popular.
Oh my God, Frosty on drums. You kidding me, dude?
Yeah, exactly.
So
And
so I
so
mean Al Rose is he's getting it all souped up, right?
he's souping up his bass because
Right,
I think he was preparing to, be like a Lee Michaels with maybe a drummer or a bassist.
right, duo kind of
But
thing.
he
Yeah.
couldn't sing. Al couldn't sing, but he could really play. His chops were, you know, great.
Oh
And
my God.
we were as high as could be in this little tiny room where his organ sounded like you know, an orchestra that was overpowering my ears. I'd never heard such an auditory explosion before. And he was a great player. And so I was singing, scatting over what he was playing. He was playing original stuff, his stuff. And I was singing to it. And we wrote a song, which actually became the first song of what was to become the Bicycle. That was the beginning of the Bicycle. I sang a song and wrote it called Journey.
Oh my God. Wait, hold on for a second. You were singing, it was, I mean, there was no rhythm section outside of him playing left-hand bass. Is that right?
Yeah, but
I believe me, those guys were monsters. I
he was
understand.
percussive. He could play
Like,
that
yeah.
choppy percussive
Oh my God. Disgusting. I mean, just
style.
filthy stuff.
It was so rhythmic.
Oh my
It was
God.
and melodic at the same time.
So talk about, he gave you the lyrics to this, or you
No, no,
eventually,
no,
yeah.
no. I was just singing and moving to what he was playing, and as I was singing, I was making up words to the melody of what he was playing.
Oh my God.
And at the end of
Oh my
that time
God.
together, I had a song called
Oh.
Journey.
So basically, there was a movie house that had been converted into a music club. Is it called the LSD Theater? It was like Noel Jukes, um, Jerry
You
Granelli.
talking
But
about in the hate or
this is more like San Francisco proper. I'm curious about when you and Al decided to expand what was to become the Bicycle. How did that happen?
well, I had met in my, searchings around San Francisco, I had met and befriended a guy named Vale Hamanaka, who was a keyboardist for a band called Blue Cheer.
Was he
And
Japanese?
yes,
My
and
God. Yeah,
Vale
so yeah, that band was on fire.
Blue Cheer. So anyway, Vale recommended we were looking for, bandmates, and Vale recommended Jim Stern as a drummer.
Oh my God.
And so
Sterno.
I connected with Jim Stern, and Jim Stern knew a guitarist named Richard Treese. And so we arranged to have a session at Richard Treese's house in Redwood City. And Jim came and set up his drums. Al and I lugged his huge, heavy B3 with the Leslie speakers into his step van, and we drove down to Redwood City and pulled electricity out of the house where Richard was living with his old lady who was pregnant with the girl who became Felicia, and we jammed. We jammed out there on the lawn
I don't
in
think I
front of
knew
his
Richard
house.
Treese was in the Bicycle. That is in, dude. Richard Treese, or was he already a known figure on the scene, or was he always kind of off the grid?
He was a little off the grid. He had been
Yeah.
playing with different bands. He was doing a lot of Vegas type uh, cover bands where you wear uniforms and you do choreographed moves and you play the cover tunes at bars and places like in Las Vegas. He was doing a lot of that, but he was an original. He wanted to do original music, and he had met Dan. And when Dan was working, as a engineer in these different recording studios, and Richard was with a band that came in and recorded with Dan, and Dan and Richard became fast friends, friends for life, really. And then they started playing together and had the Treese Healy band. It wasn't really a band; it was just the two of them.
Well, I want to be clear. I think the band, because Healy was working at Columbus Recorders, and I
He was
think
working at a lot of different places.
he was at Mercury. I'm wondering if Treese was in the Charlatans.
No, he was with a band called, I think they're called the Cheaters.
The Cheaters. Okay, so basically, that first gig, the first jam, was Rose,
Rose,
Stern.
myself,
Yeah. Stern and
Rich,
Treese.
right.
Can you talk about Stern's drumming style at that time? Because actually, now when you talk to him, he is become. I mean, the guy was always super genius engineer, but I have a feeling he was really channeling some of the jazz drummers from back then because he plays a lot of jazz now.
He was a student of music. He would, we lived together. He lived in our apartment with Nikki and I on Guerrero Street.
Unbelievable! This is all coming around again.
And he would practice on his practice pads diligently every day, nonstop. He was always practicing and studying music. He was a very smart guy, as you know, he was a student of music and a drummer of really excellent quality. His drumming was excellent, but he was light. He was a lightweight drummer
Right.
compared to a heavy rock, acid rock, heavy, bash out the drums. And so at a certain Richard Treese, who had been jamming with us, recommended Dan Healy to join the band. And so Dan came into the band, and because Richard was such a fine guitarist and had a great chemistry with Al, and Al thought two guitarists were too much. So Dan decided to play bass, and he became the bassist of the band. And Jim Stern was the first drummer, and the band was formed. We started working out, rehearsing, and
This
yeah,
is, so, I mean, I am just so humble. So wait, so Healy, would you say that he just picked up the bass? He wasn't, I mean, he was actually, it's not something that he had been shedding on.
Healy Dan was a guitarist first. He
Right.
had gravitated towards the guitar at an early age, and guitar and electronics were his thing, right? But because Richard Treese was far and above a great player, Dan decided to go to bass, which was not a far step to go from being a guitarist. And he was a very good bassist. He was good holding down the bass lines.
Okay, so exactly. And so can you talk about when you were playing all original music, is that right?
Oh, totally. Everybody, Richard and Dan. Dan was always servicing the other bands, like the Grateful Dead, Quicksilver, and so forth.
Quicksilver, he was real close with Cipollina, you know?
He was. And Dan, while servicing these other groups, was also, in a quandary because he wasn't really servicing his own musical temp, temperaments. He wanted to play. He wanted to be a player. And so joining the Bycycle gave him that opportunity. And Richard was playing all these with these cover bands.
And
And
he was sick and tired of that. He wanted to play original music.
yes, as did Al. We all did. We all wanted to play original music.
All
And
right,
of
I
course,
want to read this quote from Jim Stern because I think this is. I don't know how many interviews you listened to, but I did the video one, but I also did an audio one, and he said this and that's also on YouTube. He said, "I met Dan Healy because I was jamming at the Grateful Dead house on Ashbury Street. This is before I think Brother Fiske moved to San Francisco.
right.
Jerry Garcia and Bob Weir had been helping me, and I was jamming there at the house. Dan was the sound man for the Dead, and he was playing bass. The Dead took over the Carousel Ballroom and started running it, basically in competition with the Fillmore. And after a while, they decided to have a Tuesday night jam. It was Mickey Hart and Jerry Garcia, Jorma Kaukonen, and Jack Cassidy. Mickey had invited me up to hear him play, and the next week, Bob Weir called and asked me if I would be the drummer. Danny was the bass player in that band. we went on to form a group called Hoffman's Bicycle about Albert Hoffman falling off his bike. It then became the Bicycle, and we just went through all the usual rock and roll. Anyway, so it sounds to me like there was a connection between Stern and Healy prior to.
Yeah, I no doubt,
Yeah.
no doubt.
So, and in that sense, can you talk a little bit about once you got kind of a bag of originals together? What did you guys? Where were you guys playing out? Not even if it wasn't necessarily a gig. I mean, where were you playing?
Well, Dan was became kind of the leader of the band because he was very well connected in in the Bay Area, in the music scene. And so we began playing in small clubs and small places. There was a place up in Glen Ellen, which is in Sonoma County, and we played there regularly at the Glen Ellen Lodge,
Oh
and
my God, this is great.
we had a practice hall down on Townsend Street in San Francisco where we rehearsed regularly, like every day. And Jim and I were going there in my little Carmen Gia two-seater, you know, every night for rehearsals. And Jim is tall. And he had a big
Oh, I
afro,
know he's big. He's got a big wingspan and stuff.
and he had a big afro that extended his height by about 5 inches.
Please tell me you have pictures of this band back in the day.
Well, I'm searching
I know
for.
you're searching. I know. I'm so glad you reached out. But I mean, that is. I just to see Stern with a fro would just be legendary.
I don't know if I've got a picture of him, but it's possible. It's very possible.
Anyway, before we keep going, I want you to tell the story about how the name came to be for the band.
Well, we were sitting around in Dan's house in Sausalito, and we were all high. And somebody talked about Albert Hoffman, the chemist, who had gotten some acid on his skin. And as he was riding his bicycle home from the laboratory, he came on. And so we thought, that's it. That's the name of the band, Hoffman's Bicycle, because we wanted it to sound like, Jefferson Starship or, the Quicksilver Messenger Service. And so we called ourselves at first Hoffman's Bicycle, and then we later dropped that, and it was simpler to be the bicycle, simply the bicycle.
Right, exactly. Just the bicycle.
And I changed it to BY.
Yeah, so I've
CYCO.
never seen it spelled like that. I mean, if it was on a poster, did you change that like uh after the band had already dissolved, or you had changed
No,
it?
no,
Yeah.
no. We changed it from Hoffman's Bicycle to the bicycle.
Oh my God, that's why Stern. Oh my God, this is so freaking classic. First of all, I've done about 5 interviews with Healy, and he was talking about. I'm not that you guys played there, but there was a place in Sausalito called Gatsby's. Did you ever go there?
I think so, but
Yeah.
it wasn't a place where I remember our band
You
playing.
know, it was definitely more of a jazz place. So anyway, you get the band, you come up with the name. Healy did have aspirations about really pushing the envelope as being. He wanted to go out on not necessarily his own, but he wanted to have his own band.
Right. And that became the bicycle. We all were working together, and Jim was a part of the founding of the band. But at some point during the early stages of the band, Richard and Dan began to feel that Jim's playing was too light. They wanted a heavier hitting drummer. And I loved Jim. Everybody loved Jim. He was great to work with, and it was wonderful. And I thought he was a great drummer. But Dan and Al and Rich wanted a heavier hitting.
Well, because it was definitely not this was not a jazz band.
Not at all.
This was a
We were
blues psychedelic rock band. Yeah, you had
we
a
were
hit.
psychedelic acid rock,
Acid. That's
original.
it. That's it. So who'd you turn to?
We found, well, there was a guy that uh, both Dan and Rich knew, named Butch Giannini, and he was playing with the
Oh, I'm
band
sorry.
in the
I'm
East
sorry.
Bay.
Butch G and by far. I mean, Healy said there was nobody that was a badder cat than Butch Giannini.
Yeah, he was a great player. So he came and sat in with the band, and we loved his playing. And he really, I mean, there was a big difference between what he was accenting and what Jim had been accenting. They were both really great drummers. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, Stern's not, the bottom. He said, let me read this here, because I think it's just instructive. Giannini was like as good a drummer as Greg Elmore or uh, Jim Preston or Bill Kreutzmann. You know, he was really good drummer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
So
yeah. Go ahead.
so we loved Jim and we loved Butch, and I protested against letting Jim go. But Dan and Rich and Al were pretty firm about it. And Jim was my dear buddy. We were
Well, I mean,
roommates.
he lived in the same
We
complex as
lived
you and
together. We
yeah,
we
right,
lived
right, yeah, yeah.
and we schmoozed together. We got high. We loved each other. So I hated to see Jim go, but it wasn't. It was against my protestations that it happened. And Dan was very. Also, Dan was, and the guys were also. It was not easy thing to do. You know.
Well,
It,
even when I talked to Stern, and this is going back 12, 13 years, you could hear a little bit of, I didn't know why at the time, but all these things. He said, he goes, this is what he said. He goes, after I put together Hoffman's Bicycle with Dan Healy, I moved to Big Sur for a year. When I came back, I was living in my car. I ran into Dennis Whitted. He said, "Hey, man, what's going on?" I said, "What's going on? I'm living out of my car." He said, "I'm leaving Fantasy Records to join Paul Butterfield's band. I'm supposed to replace myself at Fantasy. Here's the R&B producer's name and phone call number. Call him." So,
right.
there's no sob story with Jim Stern. I just think that Treese and Healy made the logical change.
Right. And
Yeah.
so the band continued, and we met a guy who became our manager named Nat Shind. And Nat had formerly been with an entertainment agency in Chicago called CMA, and they began booking us on big shows. We began opening for Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, for Taj Mahal, for Canned Heat, and we had already been playing in Speedway Meadow with the Jefferson's Airplane and so forth. So
Hold on, I want to be clear. You were also playing, but at a certain point you were starting to play in
in
Golden Gate Park with the
yeah,
Renegades.
my
Wow.
dream came true to be on that stage. And
Holy cow, brother Fiske. I mean, what was that, like a year? Your dream came true within a year.
right, exactly.
So I want to be clear. You were playing opening at the Fillmore West or the Carousel. Where were you guys playing with when you'd open for Taj and
We
those guys?
were we were we opened for Taj at the Whiskey Go Go in LA.
Yeah, you guys had some connections down there because Healy was talking about. I got to find this quote, but I don't know. Giannini died in a car wreck or something.
No, no. What happened was the band was cooking along, and we had been recording with Dan producing and engineering at Pacific High Studio in San
Yes.
Francisco.
Yes.
And we were recording what we expected was going to be our first album. And it was great for us to be in the studio and to hear our sounds outside of playing live.
Hold on. Brother Fisk, you're so, I got to read this to you. Um, this is from Healy. We had a drummer, Butch Giannini, who was just phenomenal. We were playing at the Whiskey A Go Go in Hollywood. We had 5 nights stand there. After the third night, Butch had a heart attack and died. He was the most fantastic drummer I'd ever known in my life. Richard Treese, and I really made up. Well, anyway, that's what was your connection to Southern California?
I didn't have a connection to Southern
But I
California.
mean, you were able to set up gigs down there. Healy maybe
Well,
used
that
this.
was Nat. That was our manager.
Okay,
He
got it.
was
So you
he
got
was
go.
approaching Nat was approaching record companies, and we were there to do a showcase for these record companies when it happened
Oh my
that
God.
Butch died.
Oh
In
my.
the
So you were auditioning for record companies.
That was that was the deal. We were down there to do a showcase
Oh my God.
for record labels that were interested in us.
Do you remember um those final shows? Were you guys like really cooking too?
Well, we were tight. We were good. We were cooking, yeah. And we felt on top of it. Absolutely. We were ready.
And you
We were,
were essentially, I mean, uh Al didn't sing and Treese didn't sing.
no, Richard Treese did sing. He was
He
a
did
good
sing.
singer.
Okay, he was doing all that Vegas. So, but I mean, you would consider yourself kind of the lead singer in the band?
I was the lead singer of the band and the main writer, and I was out front. I was the singer in front of the band. I was,
Absolutely. Like
I,
I'm looking at this photo from your website from San Jose Pop Festival.
right,
It says 69 opening for
right,
Hendrix. Yeah.
right.
So this manager cat was hooking you guys up with gigs. Um, were you playing so you did you ever leave the state of California or was it all regional?
It was mostly regional. We played, we played shows in different parts of California, in
Right.
Fresno and LA and all around the Bay Area and up in Sacramento.
Holy cow. So I mean, were you sharing bills with other I
Yeah,
mean,
we opened for Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. We opened for Canned Heat. We were on a lot of different shows, but we were unknown, and we were usually one of the opening bands, warming up the crowd kind of thing.
I dig.
But we were
And
getting a following. We had a fan club. We had At the end of the band, we had a whole entourage. We had managers, road managers, we had roadies, we had groupies, we had we had lawyers, we had all this whole entourage of people that made up the Bicycle family. And we were ready to go on, and we had begun that recording at Pacific High Studio with Dan engineering and producing. And during those sessions at Pacific High, we had people like Bob Skaggs dropping in and saying hi, and Stephen Miller. And we were becoming, a known entity. Bill Graham was very interested in us. So,
I want to, brother,
as
this
was
is
Chet
so
Helm.
important. This is so um you're cutting up, you're doing some cutting room floor stuff at Pacific High Recorders, which Santana's first album was recorded there. A lot of cool stuff. I would just because there's really nothing out there currently that is a good example of the Bicycle sound. What were I mean with because of
Well, just
all the
wait.
that?
There's an end to the coming end to this story.
Go
And
ahead.
that is that after the dramatic and horrifying end
Oh,
of Butch being our drummer, the Bicycle broke up. Dan had it. I had it. I wanted a different lifestyle. I didn't want to keep going down the road where, you know, uh, drug drug addiction was prevalent and people were, ODing and having all kinds of coming down trauma. And so I wanted out of that. and Dan had it as well. And so the band broke up, and those recordings that we had started at Pacific High Recorders was never finished. We had done about the equivalent of half an album, and a lot of it was jamming. We were just, experimenting with some
Sure,
of our material. Some of it didn't even have singing or words on it, and some of it was more finished. Some cuts were more finished than other cuts.
sure.
But what happened was, at the end of the Bycycle, Dan went to Pacific High, picked up the tapes, which were 1 inch, 12 track, which is now obsolete format. And he packed them up and put them into storage and never, ever listened to them.
He was devastated by Giannini, though. That was just so tragic, man.
It was. It
Okay,
was.
so now,
So then
yeah, yeah.
I was woodshedding, what the musicians call woodshedding.
No, I know
I
that. I love that term, dude.
I got a fake book and was rehearsing. I figured I'll go play in bars and clubs and play my guitar and sing and get work as a solo artist. And I was doing that, and I was actually doing it pretty well. I was booked 5, 6 nights a week, but in those days you didn't make much money. Maybe you got $50, and uh, plus tips. Maybe he made $75 plus
Hold
tips.
before no before because there's a huge part of the Fisk story with Hendrix and Feliciano, but I want to just finish this bicycle thing because when Brother Fisk first reached out to me, you said that you've been in touch. I want to finish the circle here. Are will or are you working on unearthing some of those tapes that
Well,
Healy?
let me tell you what happened. I wound up going to LA to fulfill opportunities that were offered to me in the music business.
Right.
And I lost touch with the guys in the band. I knew that Al had been busted in a drug raid. He was a dealer. And I knew
Obviously, yeah, yeah.
he had been busted, and he probably had wound up in prison. And we don't know what happened to Al. We searched for him. I did some searching online. I couldn't find him anywhere.
Yeah. Oh
And Nat
man.
Shind, who had been the manager, became also was involved in operating a venue in San Rafael called Pepperland.
Pepperland. I've never heard of that.
Pepperland was supposed to be another type of Fillmore operation.
Well, it was kind of like there was a place out there for a long time called the Lion's Share, you know?
No, no, it wasn't the Lion's Share.
Right, Pepperland. Good. Okay, got
It
it.
was called Pepperland. It was a much bigger hall. But Nat also got busted for drugs, and we don't know what happened to him. So,
Holy cow! I mean, you're talking about three. Giannini tragically dies, and you have no idea where your manager or Rose. I mean,
wound up.
they theoretically they could still be alive.
Theoretically, they could,
Yeah.
but I was searching online and I was unable to find any trace of them.
I'm so glad that you found me. Anyway, so you're
So,
down.
so over
Yeah,
the years, I knew that Richard and Dan were playing together and
sure,
were
sure.
tight, but I was off into my own thing, and I had intermittent correspondence with Dan, but not very often. I knew that Richard had passed away,
Right.
and then I wound up moving to Virginia and buying a house here because we couldn't afford to buy a house in LA. It was out of the question. It was
Way out, way
so
out.
overpriced.
It's too bad you didn't have a little bit in, it's too bad you didn't invest in real estate back in '68 in San
I didn't
Francisco.
have the money.
No, I did. I mean, just you would have been living high and wide right now, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Go
was.
ahead. Yeah.
Anyway, we lived in Venice Beach. My wife and I, and we raised 3 children at this 2-bedroom house
Wow.
in Venice Beach, which was a rented house for 48 years. Anyway, we I was intermittently connecting with Dan, and I was going back to California and playing some gigs. And I called up Dan, and he said, "Let's get together." So we met at the Marin, uh, what is it, the
The
Rod and Gun Club.
it wasn't the auditorium, was it?
No, no, no. We met at this Rod and Gun Rod
Oh
and
my
Gun
God,
Club.
that's dude. I got to send you my interview with Healy from the Marin Rod and Gun Club. That's a legend. We did an interview there.
Right. Well,
Oh
that's what
my.
Dan suggested we meet.
Okay.
And so
When?
we
By the
met
way, what year was this? What year was this?
just last year.
Oh, this is so beautiful, man. This is making my. This is warming my heart, dude.
So Nikki and I, my wife and I, and Dan and his wife, Patty, met there. And Dan and I were immediately connected, just like as if
Oh
nothing
my
had
God, this
changed
is so beautiful.
with the bicycle. And of course, we reminisced a lot. And then we decided, Dan told me that he had the tapes from Pacific High Recording
Oh my
Studio
God. Oh my
and was keeping them in a climate control
God.
storage unit. And we could get those tapes. But we would have to find a way to convert them from 1-inch 12 track, which format doesn't exist anymore, to digital. And so I did some research and found a studio in Long Beach that was a conversion studio that did exactly that kind of thing. And I spoke to the guy named David Allard.
What's the name of the studio, by the way?
Well, it was just David Allard's uh, conversion
But
studio.
that kind of format he did. They did that.
They did, and he was obviously he was an Englishman, and but had been in America for a long time, and he was obviously a skilled technician. And Dan and I decided, well, this is the place to do that. So Dan sent the tapes, drove the tapes down to dropped them off
Drove
at
them
his.
down, dude. I love it.
He drove the tapes
Oh my God.
down. They were in big boxes, drove them down and left them at his daughter Ambrosia's house.
Right.
Ambrosia had followed Dan's footsteps in the music business and was an executive at Capitol Records. And so I went over to Ambrosia's house, picked up the tapes, and brought them to David Allard's studio. And we were unsure whether the tapes were still, did they need to, be treated? But Dan said, "Oh, no, no, they should be fine. They should be ready to go." And he was right. They didn't need any treatment. So the tapes were converted to digital without any problem.
Unbelievable.
And then
You're going to tell me that since '68,
right,
he had them in a climate.
69.
Giannini passed in '69.
Right.
So, you're telling me that he had a climate controlled storage unit since that time? I mean, that's insane.
Well, Dan was running a radio station.
Oh, I know. Fight the Mighty.
And he had all kinds of tapes and products on of recording that he was keeping in the studio. But
oh my God,
it had to be kept. It had to be climate controlled. It had to be kept at the right temperature.
It was in like Guernerville or something. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So everything got transferred. Has Brother Fiske had a chance to get his ears around it?
Well, I went I brought the tapes back to Dan.
You drove them back.
Right.
Oh, this is great.
We sent the digitals, of course, via email,
Sure.
but I brought the tapes back to Dan. And then
the original source. Yeah, of course.
Dan had in his house in Woodacre, he has a studio in his house. And so we began the process of listening and the process of mixing the songs that were there. Not everything was a song, not everything was completed, not everything
Absolutely,
was
absolutely.
whole tracked. So there were like maybe half a side of an album that were complete cuts. But we did the job of mixing them down.
Roughly how many hours of content did you have to go through?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure
I
that.
mean, basically the point is that like you weren't going to foist a live album onto record executives for the showcase. You guys were ready to, like, when they were like, we want to sign you, and you're like, great, we have a record. You guys were pretty much on the precipice of
We
having a
didn't
record.
have, yeah, we didn't have any live cuts. We didn't
Right.
have,
So,
the band was never recorded live,
right.
although we got some cassette recordings that were full of noise of clubs and people drinking and talking, and the clubs were filled with smoke in those days, and people were smoking and clinking glasses and talking, and there was all kinds of noise ambient in the space, and so those recordings were never really too good.
Going back to the so what finally how many days did you spend mixing with?
Oh, about I spent 4 or 5 days with Dan in Woodacre at his home,
Oh
staying
my God, this is last year.
last year.
Oh, brother Fisk, man, you
And
made. Thanks.
we did some mixing. I had been already in LA. I had been mixing and producing music in studio. I made several albums myself, and so it was great to work with Dan. It was great the two of us, had a chance to do this. And this was, for us, it was like the completion of this whole journey. And what I'm doing, and so the recordings are good. The songs sound really good.
Oh my God, this is
We've
great.
got at least 4 cuts that I would say are radio ready.
Oh my God, this is so freaking great. I
As
am. I mean, you mean like
radio ready in the
no,
realm of
no. I mean, but radio
classic
friendly.
rock.
Like, I mean, knowing Healy, are these 3 minute radio friendly tracks or more like 8 or 9 minute tracks?
Oh no, no. We were in the studio not as a jam and stretch out band. We were in the studio cutting tracks for
Unfreaking
radio. So,
real.
so the
I
songs
dig.
are 3 or 4 minutes long each.
And you want, all right, and you're thinking that it would be a good potentially to release this at some point while you guys are still with us.
Well, that's in the back of our minds. I think foremost in our minds was just first to listen,
Sure.
make sure that the tracks were all there, and then when we decided, well, man, this is good. The band was good, uh, but we had disappeared. We were forgotten and we were lost, and now we're found. And so we mixed the songs down, and what I'm doing as we are speaking is I am writing up the story. It's a very colorful story of the Bycycle, the band that once was lost but now it's found. I don't know if that's going to be the subtitle, but that's what it's really about. And we have the recordings, so along with the story, and we have pictures. As a matter of fact, just yesterday, I was speaking to a woman who was around the Bycycle. She was a photographer, and I said, "Did you ever take pictures of the band?" And she said, "Hundreds. I've got hundreds of pictures." And so she lives out in Palm Desert, and she's not. She has trouble moving around. She has to walk with it. She's got a walker, and she said that everything is so cluttered and crowded. She's living in a trailer,
Oh,
and she said somewhere there's slides, and they're somewhere in there, because we were having trouble finding pictures of the band. Because I'm envisioning putting together a booklet that tells the story. It's not only a story of the band, but it's a story of music and people embarking upon the journey of music and in a historical sequence of the 1960s to 2025, where we now sit. And so it has that, it has a historical aspect
Can
to
I
the
can I can
story.
I just want to, my gut feeling is that you absolutely if it's going to be a if it's going to be an extensive thing, you should absolutely, and let's just say for instance there are 4 tracks. Let's just say you can't go any farther than that. I would do 2 tracks. I would cut vinyl only, and I would have a huge liner note booklet. Do not put it, I mean, you want to put it out digitally is fine. Put it on vinyl. It is going to resonate in a huge way with younger cats, especially if there's going to be an exhaustive Fiske write-up about the bicycle. That is my suggestion.
Well,
Vinyl,
it's a Fisk Healy write-up.
of course, it's a Fiske Healy, right? I mean, but I mean, this is the most. I mean, you have to realize. I mean, my 2 daughters. I mean, they only listen to early 80s Grateful Dead. And the only reason that we listen to that period is because Dan Healy, I mean, without Dan Healy, there is no Grateful Dead. Okay, because basically they were playing out of crappy PA systems, all right? And he made that sound. He turned the Greek in Berkeley into a good listening place. I mean, and I never saw the Dead. I was too young and dumb. I mean, by the 90s, I don't think I would have wanted to see him. But Dan opened the door and gave me 6 interviews. And most of those guys in the band, I mean, I interviewed Bobby, but it's just like the entourages and this and that. And I am indebted to Dan Healy for life. And the fact that you have come out of nowhere is absolutely profound, man. So let me ask you a question. Can we do set 2 next week? Because I do want to continue on with your career, but after Thanksgiving, we can maybe do another set.
Uh-huh. Okay, great.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
And
I've got an appointment in about 20 minutes, so I got
do
to.
your thing, man. No, this is listen. Also, I mean, are you on? You need to get on new media, man. You're not on Facebook or Insta. I mean, I'm gonna be blowing out all this content, dude.
I'm on Facebook. I do have a Facebook. I
Hold,
haven't, you
hold
know,
on. I'm looking here. Richard Fiske, Paul
no.
Fiske,
Stephen
Jackie
Longfellow Fiske. My middle name is
Longfellow.
Longfellow.
All right. Well, listen. I'm gonna get this up. I'll send you a copy of this. And then we'll touch base next week. And thank you for have a great Thanksgiving. This was highly informative. And if you haven't heard
Thank you
my,
for contacting, connecting me to Jim again. I'm looking forward to saying hi to him.
honestly, man, you tell him I send my love because that dude, what he did at Fantasy Studios was profound. And he turned that some of the greatest jazz records of all time came out of that because he re-outfitted that entire. Him and Healy were both super sonic geniuses, man. So are you, but I mean, it just never stops, man. So happy Thanksgiving and bless your family, man.
Thank you, and same to you. And I look forward to what you're going to do.
We're gonna continue on, brother Fiske, and
All right, we'll continue on, and I look forward to that.
all right, brother. I'll talk to you soon, man.
Thank you so much. Okay,
Later. Bye.
bye bye.